Hi, I'm Valerie Miner, the Coordinator for Professional Development and Mentoring.
I'm Suzanne McGahee. I'm the Social Studies Coordinator for grades K through 12.
Welcome to our session on increasing rigor, engagement, and relationships through asking the right questions.
All right, so the first thing we have here is, what the heck does questioning have to do with relationships? So think to yourself just quickly about that question. Okay, so we're going to kind of give you some examples. So think about when you're first building relationships with people. You might ask them questions like, what was your first job? Or, what's your favorite ice cream? Or what's your favorite book? Those are kinds of things that you ask at the beginning of a relationship, right? To try and build that. Those things don't require a ton of thinking, right? But as we move up a little bit and we start to know each other a little bit more, you might say, okay, instead of like, what is your favorite book? Like, how many times have you read your favorite book? And what is it that draws you to that book that you want to read it over and over, right?
That kind of gives us a little more risk taking too.
Yeah. Right. And it makes the person really stop and think like, why do I love this book so much? What is it that I connect with so strongly? And then the sort of next level, you could go even deeper and say like, well, which character in the book most reflects your beliefs or your values, or just reflects, who you are. And again, that really makes the person stop and think. So
for sure.
Yeah. So what the heck does questioning have to do with relationships? I think the deeper you want to create that relationship, the deeper the questioning should be, right? So kind of think about what you want to have in your classroom.
So let's look at some quotes, and we're going to do a little activity with these quotes. So Suzanne and I will just kind of read through these, even though we know you can read, but variety is the spice of life.
Right. The best way to keep good acts is to refresh them with new.
No pleasure endures unseasoned by variety.
Sameness is the mother of disgust, variety the cure.
I love that one. Yeah. Sour, sweet, bitter, pungent, it all must be tasted.
That's a good one too.
Yes, I like that one. Awesome.
All right, you want to go ahead and explain?
Sure. So if you were in our live session, we'd actually put you in a breakout room at this point and have you guys discuss these questions with the questions that you see on, or I'm sorry, discuss these quotes with the questions that you see on the screen. But what we're going to have you do is, of these quotes that we just read through, we want you to pick one of the quotes, pause the video in just a second, and then answer those two questions that you see on the screen about those quotes. And then we want you to also think about a time or a situation that you might be able to use an activity like this in your class, putting students in small groups, discussing, what situation, what types of things might they discuss, and how might they build that relationship within your class. So go ahead and pause the video and spend a couple of minutes working through that activity.
All right, welcome back.
Welcome back from the paused video. Excellent. We hope you weren't gone too long.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is actually go through this variety. We're going to talk about 4 kind of different main things here. So we're going to talk about varying, or the variety of goals, of thinking, and then delivery and representation. So I always like to say that novelty kind of helps spark different parts of your brain, and it really makes your students kind of hang on every word that's happening in your classroom. It helps them make deeper connections. So I love that variety, that idea of novelty, to kind of keep that going. Also, how boring is life if you're doing literally the same thing every day in class, right?
That's what I was thinking. Like, those of you who are old enough to remember, like me, remember the movie Teachers? Do you remember?
I never saw that one.
Because you're young. So in the movie Teachers, the kids walk into the government class. Unfortunately, it's a social studies class. And they walk in and they pick up their worksheet and they go to their desk and they do their worksheet. And then at the end, the bell rings and they put their worksheet in the basket and they leave. And the whole time they don't understand, or they don't realize that the teacher has died. So the teacher is in the back of the classroom holding his newspaper. And the kids are so like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like
programmed.
Yeah.
Just to do that they don't even realize that the teacher has passed away.
I would hope none of us ever want that to happen.
Right. So, give them some variety and some surprises every once in a while. So,
if nothing else, just so they know that you died or not.
Yes, exactly. All right, moving on.
Yes, let's talk about, we'll start with goals. So when we're looking at goals, we need to think about when we're asking students questions. So we always hear, and I always had struggled developing effective questions, right? And there's lots of great tools that we're going to be talking about. But we need to ask ourselves, what is the primary goal of the question that I'm asking? Is it just because, okay, I know I need to stop and check for understanding, so I'm just going to ask a question? Or do we really want to have the students digging in and getting to a specific kind of base of knowledge? The question designed to, really check for understanding while targeting that rigor, which we're going to spend some time talking about rigor. Is the question designed for relationships? We kind of talked a little bit about the questions that help build that relationship. Have I designed questions for differentiating different needs for my students, which we always know is a very challenging thing to do? Or am I just trying to get my students engaged and involved in their own learning, which of course we want, right? We want to hear more student voice than teacher voice in those classrooms. We want to be bored just because they're doing all the work. So maybe sometimes our questions are really just giving them time to kind of dig into things. I think when we talk about relationships, engagement, and differentiation, I think if we just asked you, like, what do these mean? I think everybody would pretty much have the same definition. But I think the thing that maybe is a little bit different or harder to grasp, and everyone kind of has a different idea, is the idea of rigor, right? So we know we all have people that are around us, maybe not, of course, in our district, because that's never a thing, that they think rigor means, oh, so I have a pre-AP class, so my regular class gets 2 worksheets, but my pre-AP class gets 5, right?
Yeah,
because
right.
they have to do more work. That's
Right.
more rigorous. But obviously all of you are here because you know that there's much more to rigor than just the amount of work. So kind of thinking through how that matches.
Yeah, so please don't do that to kids, right? Okay.
So what the heck is rigor? So let's kind of dig into that. But what I want you to do before we dig into this is take 1 second or a couple of seconds and just write down, what is your definition of rigor, and see how it compares to what Suzanne and I are going to present that we think rigor is. Okay. All right.
All right. Hopefully you have an answer.
Yes.
Okay. If not, pause and then come back to it.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So you can always get another colored pen if you want to add, but let's look at some example of rigor. So again, these questions are starting from kind of a low rigor to a higher rigor, but you might notice that they're not necessarily like 8,000 times longer just because they're rigorous, right? So we need to, again, remember, it's not about the amount or the length. So thinking just about the weekend. We love the weekend. I love the weekend, right? So our first question that would be pretty simple, doesn't require a ton of thinking, right? What days are considered the weekend? I mean, if some of us would like to say like all the days are the weekend, right? But fortunately, we know that's not true.
At least Friday night
Right.
into Sunday night.
Hey, in the summer, Fridays are weekend for
Yes,
us.
yes.
And then, so the next level would be distinguish between your daily routine on weekdays versus weekends. Okay. Again, I have to think a little bit more. I don't know about you, but I feel like my weekends are almost busier than my weekdays with kids.
Yes, they definitely are. It requires a lot of juggling.
So we could go kind of a little bit deeper. Analyze your weekday routine. And can you find inefficiencies in time management to allow for more free time on the weekend? Oh, that kind of fits right into what I was saying there.
Yeah.
So can I fit soccer practice at 7 a.m. on Monday? Well, actually she does, but
Good times.
right. And then the next section. So apply your analysis of that inefficient time management to determine if a 4-day week is feasible for your place of work. Oh, so we could make a little proposal about having 4-day school weeks. I think everybody could be on board with that. Developing an argument for or against and include a set of efficiency guidelines. Man, this sounds like a great project.
Yes,
for kiddos.
it does. For like college students too.
Yes.
Like thinking about time management. And
I love
that.
it. And then lastly, how does the idea of routine and efficiency apply in more than this one context? Did you have something you wanted to add?
No. I don't think so.
Awesome. So again, you can see how these questions are built on each other. And I think the other thing we need to talk about when it comes to this is we don't always have to be way up here for rigor, right? We had to start at the base. And it is okay to sometimes ask those recall questions to kind of get things started. We don't want to stay there either, but every question we ask doesn't have to be apply this to a new situation, because they can't apply it if they haven't talked about the basics first. I think it's important for us to remember that as well.
And also like pointing out, if you start at level 4, you're probably not going to get a lot of conversation because kids are going to read that question. How does the idea of routine and efficiency apply in more than one context? They're going to be like, what are you talking about? So you've got to remember to scaffold and build in the skills, in this particular instance, the thinking skills, to get them to that final place. So you're kind of cheating them if you don't go through the various levels and all of a sudden deciding, well, these are gifted and talented kids. They should be able to answer question 4 with no problem, with no background. You're probably not going to have a high degree of success.
That's such a great point. I think it also, that you just made me think about the relationship questions. It would be like, I coming up to Suzanne, I've never met her before. And I'm like, tell me what book character you most identify with and why. Like, who is this freak asking me this question? So I think it's good too, if you think back to that relationship piece, is you always need to start at those kind of more surface level questions, make students feel safer. And then they're going to feel more comfortable to take those either intellectual or personal risks in your class. I just got goosebumps because that is such a fun connection.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So again, what we're talking about with rigor, it's not more physical work. It's like more mental work, right? It's more thinking. So we have here this from Lead Forward, just kind of the thinking levels here, right? So starting with just summarizing, putting things in order. Those are very simple, and it's okay if we are there for a little bit. We have to get our students comfortable with the material before they can then think of a cause and effect or applying it to a certain situation. Yeah. So again, think about your goal. Where are you in, the relationship building of your classroom community, and where are you in kind of learning that material?
Right. And so I think of like a historical example when teaching social studies is like, what led to Truman's decision to drop the atomic bomb to end World War II, or what were the causes that led to World War II and all that? Well, if the kids, you can't have them understand cause and effect or compare, classify or even analyze decisions if they don't understand, like, what were the steps that got us into war, whether it be the World War II, the Civil War. So they have to understand those basic pieces of information. And like Val said, you don't live there forever, but they can't do the big thinking if they haven't been provided, again, the steps and the scaffolding in their thinking.
That's a great point. It's like trying to get on the roof without using steps on the ladder.
Yes, there you go.
All right, so we've been kind of dancing around thinking. So let's talk about this. And we're actually going to use a movie story that probably everybody's familiar with to kind of show a simple example of this. So we're going to be looking at Cinderella when we're looking at this. So first, just kind of thinking through the thinking levels that we want to get our students to. Again, it's okay to start with recall. We want to make connections. Like, how does this make you remember something that you might have learned in a previous class, or what previous knowledge do you have? It helps them make more connections there if we start there. So it's okay. And it's okay for them to spend some time just understanding the vocabulary and recalling those definitions. I don't necessarily mean writing down vocab words and definitions. I just mean working and getting that vocabulary. And then we've learned some new skills. So let's apply it, some of those skills and concepts. So maybe practice. Again, that doesn't have to be a worksheet. That can be discussion. That can be a lab activity. It could be a little mini project. It could be a little bit of research there, just anything to kind of get them applying those skills and concepts, digging in with probably other students and kind of processing what they've learned. Then we move on to kind of more strategic reasoning and more extended reasoning. And that's when we're getting into that example that Suzanne was just saying, is that they're really trying to understand that cause and effect. And then how can maybe that apply to a situation that we're seeing in today's world? So I think that, again, we're not living there, but we eventually probably want to get them to that level for a little bit to start making those connections.
Right. And just remember, not every kiddo, extended reasoning for kids is going to look different depending on where they are and what your goals for that particular student are.
Yes. All right. So the other thing that I think a lot of us are guilty of is we're just going to look at the verb of the question. Oh, I see describe. That is a level 1 question, right? They're just describing what something looks like. But we have to actually look a little bit deeper than that. And so we can't fall victim to that. And I will be 100% honest. I have fallen victim to that before too. I'm like, oh, this is a describe question. We're good. And then I'm getting my kiddos into the discussion. I'm like, oh, we are not ready for this question because it's way deeper than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at these kind of different levels here. So the first one was describe 3 characteristics of metamorphic rocks. Obviously, that's just simple recall. It's something they probably started learning in like the 1st grade. And it's something that they learn a couple of times throughout their science career in school. Characteristics, check. We can get those down if there's a right or wrong answer, right? So that's a very simple base level question. Next, describe the difference between metamorphous and igneous rock. So now here's a compare and contrast. Even though it says describe, it really is a compare and contrast. So, we've moved up that next level because now we have to remember the 2 types of rocks and those similarities and differences. And then lastly, we have describe a model that you might use to represent the relationships that exist within the rock cycle. So what level is that? To me, that seems like an apply.
Mm-hmm.
So again,
Definitely.
it starts with describe, but very much to me, it seems like I'm having to take what I know and create some sort of model and apply that knowledge.
And again, you wouldn't start with that last thing,
Yes.
right? That may be your goal. Like you may tell kids at the end of this, you're going to be able to do this, but I'm going to provide all of the scaffolding necessary over the course of our studies to get you there.
Yes.
Right. So the kids feel safe going into that situation.
Yes. And it's all about the context of the question. That's where the thinking is happening. So while I think it's always been ingrained in us that it's all about the verb. I feel like we hear this all the time, but it's really about the context of the question. So looking at that carefully.
Definitely.
So here's just an example, and it's a little bit light, so hopefully you're able to see it, but just kind of the different levels. So we're talking about summer, glorious summer that all of you are enjoying right now. So our level 1, recall, memorize. What date does summer begin? Are we talking about school summer or real summer?
Yeah.
And then level 2, what are some activities you can do in the summer that you can't do in the winter? So there's maybe a compare contrast situation happening there. Level 3, let's analyze. So how does summer impact the agricultural economy in the U.S.? Oh, there we go. Suzanne should like that question.
I hate geography, but it's all good.
And then level 4, create, design, evaluate. Design an interview with summer. I love that.
I know.
So let's personify summer.
I think I would ask them, why are you so short?
Yes. Why can't I have more pool time?
Yeah. All right. So now we're going to get into the Cinderella that you were talking about earlier.
Yes. Okay. So again, everybody's probably familiar with the story of Cinderella. If not, you can Google it really quickly to remind yourself of this wonderful little fairy tale here. But we're going to dig into some questioning on that. So we're going to practice these level 1, 2, and 3 questions with Cinderella. So pause the video in just a second, and you're going to actually try to think of a question for each level. So remember, level 1, the answer, we could read the story and find it in the text. It's very explicit. It's clearly expressed right there, like what kind of shoe did Cinderella wear, right? Level 2, the answer is more implied. We have more of a why. We're analyzing the text a little, maybe reading between the lines. The hidden meaning, there's hidden meaning that's understood, but maybe not directly expressed. And then level 3 goes beyond the text, inquires into the value, importance, and application of that information. So that's where we're kind of thinking about what's our next step. How can we apply this? So pause the video and see if you can just come up with a question or two about at each level.
Okay.
All right. So we should be able to move these magical boxes. We may have to unpresent.
Oh, yes.
So I'll just escape us here.
Okay.
And then let's kind of look, they should come. So let's look at a level 1 example. Let's see, drum roll.
Yes.
Ta-da! What were Cinderella slippers made out of? That's a obviously easy question, right? They talk about the glass slipper all the time.
Oh, I was going to be a smart aleck and go like leather. Yeah, no. Not
Leather was probably a little more practical those days, I would think.
I don't know how she ran in glass slippers or why one fell off and the other didn't.
Yes.
Okay.
Ooh, that could be like a level 3 question.
There you go. There you go.
What's another level 1 question we have on here? How did Cinderella get to the ball? See, very simple.
Pumpkin, the same way everybody gets to the ball,
Obviously,
right?
that's how I got to work today.
Yeah. And then the last one.
How many stepsisters did she have? So again, very simple. We could look right in the text and find those answers.
All right. You want to look at some level 2?
Yes. Would you like to read the level 2, Suzanne?
Sure. So why does Cinderella's stepmother care whether or not she goes to the ball? So you really have to kind of understand the intrinsic motivation of the stepmother and what she was really invested in, or who she was really invested in. Right?
Yes.
So why did everything turn back the way it was except the glass slipper? Which is always the question. Like, as a little kid, I remember thinking, well, why didn't the slipper just go away or turn back? But we don't know.
Every girl loves a pair of shoes. Maybe that's why.
Maybe that's why. And then the last one, why don't the stepsisters like Cinderella? So what is it that's going on there? Is it jealousy? You know,
I'm sure it has nothing to do with the stepmother at all.
Yeah, really. Yeah. All right. Some level 3.
Yes.
Ready? Okay.
Does a woman's salvation always lie in a man? Ooh, that's deep.
It is deep. And again, you don't just go watch Cinderella and then, or read Cinderella and then answer these questions, right? So if you're Disney, it almost seems like yes. So that may be another question. Like, why does Disney keep presenting this stuff?
Yes. Except for Elsa, you know.
This one.
What does it mean to live happily ever after? Very good.
Very different definition or answers to that.
Does good always overcome evil? I think we could all answer that question.
We hope.
Yes.
That is our hope. All right. So hopefully this gives you some practice with looking at level 1, 2, and 3 questions with something that you're very familiar with.
Yes. Thanks for being our Vanna White, Suzanne.
Of course.
All right. So if you were with us, we'd be able to give you a copy of this sheet, but unfortunately, you're just going to have to look at the slide, but it'll be good. So we're going to give you some chance to actually look at a level 1 question and practice raising the thinking level. So again, as you are creating questions, the whole idea behind this is when you're creating questions for your class and for your students, you can look at, you know, sort of what's that base level question, and then how can I continue to scaffold that question up? And when is it that we're going to be able to kind of start living or visiting that level 3? So what we're going to have you do is there is a sample. So if we look at that first line, what are the names of the 2 stepsisters? Then level 2 would be compare and contrast Cinderella to one of her stepsisters. And then level 3 would be identify the characteristics that make Cinderella's stepsister so undesirable to the prince. Is it their big feet? I don't know.
Yeah.
So what you're going to do, we'll have you pause the video and you can just work on this however long you want to kind of dig into it, is you're going to select one question or however many questions you want to practice with. And you're just going to refine that rigor level from level 1, then moving it up to level 2 to kind of get in them a little bit deeper, and then ultimately to that level 3. So we just want to give you some time to practice that. So go ahead and pause the video and work through some of those questions. You probably are familiar with the Lead Forward app. It's something that I wish when I was in the classroom had been a thing, because, oh my goodness, it's so easy to be able to do quick checks. So if you haven't already downloaded the Lead Forward app, I definitely recommend that you do that. I know that there's multiple sessions going on during KU that actually talk through the Lead Forward app. So one of the things to look at are the Think It Up little activity on there, and it's really just question stems to help you develop those questions. So you're not having to just come up with them on your own. You can actually look at the app and get some of those ideas.
Right. And a lot of studies have shown, guys, that like thinking of really deep questions, like level 3 questions, is nearly impossible on the fly. So these would be very helpful in creating those moments where you have some deeper level questioning, if you're not at a place where you could sit and really think about that, because again, it is super hard to come up with those on the fly.
That's such a great point. And then on the other end of that is kind of a scaffold for your students. They have something called thinking stems. And that's something that you can actually give to your students to help them answer the questions that you just come up with. It's not giving them answers. It's like a sentence frame that helps them with sort of the language. So then all they're having to do is think about the answer and not having to think about how do I put this in a sentence. So it kind of takes that pressure off of them. If you're familiar with Avid, it's very much like just a sentence frame. And so you're going to find both of these in that when you're on the Lead Forward app, you look under the purple resources content builders, and you can find both the Think It Up for you to ask the questions and the thinking stems for students. And if we'll go to the next slide, I'll actually show you that you can actually print these out for your students. They have different levels, beginning, intermediate, advanced. You might also see that they have cognates on here. They have Spanish on here. So if you have any EL students in your class as well, these could be helpful again. So they're not having to think about the language. They're really focusing their brain power on the content, which is what we want them to do.
Yes.
And then just again, another example of how you can look at those different levels in the Think It Up, and then you see the thinking stems, you can actually pull those up and print those out so that you have those to give out to your kiddos.
Right. And you can keep these laminated on the desk and because next year we actually get to touch things.
Yes.
Move things around and all that. So
Amazing.
I would suggest laminating them, putting them on if you have a central supply station in the middle of your tables or something like that, that would be an awesome place to put those. So the kids know it's right there for them. They can use it and then gradually, maybe over time, wean themselves off of it as they become more comfortable.
Yes. And I guess you probably could also put them in Google Classroom or Canvas too, as well, so that they have access to that.
Exactly.
All right. So that was a lot of information about thinking and goals. So we want to give you some time to reflect. So again, in just a minute, we're going to just have you pause. And we really do encourage you to take this time to process and reflect, because it's really hard to really take in information if you don't give yourself that time to process and reflect. So thinking about how can varying the thinking, the support, rigor, relationships, engagement, and differentiation. So how does that varying support the development of all of these things? How does it support rigor and development of that? How does it support that development of relationships, your student engagement, and how you're differentiating in the classroom? So unfortunately, we can't write your thoughts in the chat because you're not with us. So you'll have to reflect it, but you can always email us your thoughts. We would love that.
Yes, definitely. Okay.
Awesome. So as you're coming back, just kind of to wrap this up a little bit, remembering that, that goal that you have set for where you want your students to get, that should be reflected in everything that you do, right? So not just in that thinking, but we also need to, what is my goal for student engagement? What is that goal for differentiation? How does that all fit together? So it's important for you to kind of start making those connections and thinking and planning that ahead of time. And remembering, as we talked back at our original conversation about rigor, we don't want to have them dive into this amazing classroom discussion that's deep and there's so much great discourse going on. And then, oh, here's your vocab worksheet, so turn this in tomorrow, right? We want to make sure that what we're having them do to actually kind of play with or process that information matches that goal that we've set for our questioning and for our rigor. And again, just a reminder, it's not always about the deep thinking. Sometimes we do have to build that base, that foundation of just basic thinking before we can get them up there so that we can get that really great discourse and that deep student understanding. So just kind of a couple of things to think about.
Very good. You said it all.
Well, beautiful.
Awesome.
Look at that.
Yeah. All right. Moving right along. So the last couple of things here don't take nearly as much time, so you're almost done. So thinking about the variety of delivery and representation, or in other words, how am I going to deliver the information? How are the kids going to deliver the information? How are they going to represent their thinking? So there's a couple of different ways. Again, variety is the spice of life, right? That was one of the quotes. So we don't want to be that teacher that just gets your worksheet out of the basket and then go sit down and do it.
And then I die in the back of the classroom and you don't know it.
You have no clue. So you just go to lunch. So, all right. So let's look at different ways to do this. So let's say that you do have those thinking stems or you have question stems for the kiddos. They could roll the dice. So on the Chromebook, there's a dice extension they can actually just hit if they're doing something electronic. They hit that dice extension or they actually roll the dice and they roll, let's say, a 5, and then they can look on the thinking stems chart or question stems and really think or answer a level 5 question or a level 2 question. The popsicle sticks that we have there are various levels. So the kids can pick out a popsicle stick, or you can pick out a popsicle stick and say, this is going to be our exit ticket, and whatever it is, it is. So it can be like, infer why Cinderella's stepmother was so cruel to her. Or, you know, compare and contrast, like you were saying earlier, Cinderella's stepsisters to Cinderella, what makes them the same and different. The cards act much the same way as the dice. If you have a deck of cards, the kids can pull out a card, or you can pull out a card and say, okay, this is the level of thinking that we're going to be at today based on the level of card.
Yeah.
So, anything to add?
No.
All right. So this, you can do sort of the same thing with Jenga. So this requires some work on your part, and it doesn't have to be, you know, every single piece in the Jenga game. But you create like a little Jenga tower. Each one you'll see has various different verbs on there, right? Different ways of thinking. So you can then connect content to a main idea, or so I think the different colors represent different types of thinking. Or,
the different levels. I actually did an activity similar to this for star review, and when I taught biology, the kids loved it, just having kind of that gaming aspect to it as well. So it's fun, and you set it up one time, then you know you can use it however many times you need to. So
yeah,
I love that one.
That's a great one. All right, this is one of our favorites, and you're going to see 3 different versions of this with the clock. So basically, you can use either the hour hand, the minute hand, the second hand, whichever you want, to say, okay, it is now 2:45. We are going to use our clock for our thinking. We're going to interpret. Lionel, what would you do in science? Interpret
a graph, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, looking at a graph of like enzyme reaction or something like that.
Okay. Or if it were closer to 3:20, you could do predict. So based
Predict
on
what's going to happen next in the experiment, based on the data that we have.
Yes. Or, you know, predict what will Truman do when it comes to dropping the bomb. Historically, we know that he did, but if kids could predict his behavior based on evidence and things like that.
Oh, yeah,
So we love this clock idea. I thought it was super cute. And then this is just another version of it. Takes it a little bit deeper, and it also provides sentence stems for kids. So if you have some ELL learners in your classroom, so they could, you know, it's what is the main idea, and then they've got the sentence stem there to help them complete that.
I love that one. And it, you know, it has like, do a Venn diagram here, and just such a great added support for the students as well as the teacher now too. I'm like, okay, so now it's 30 after the hour. So we're going to summarize, you know, the last couple of seconds, and here's a sentence frame to do that. I love that.
Right. And again, you do this once and it's up, right? And then you don't have to go, oh my gosh, what is my exit ticket going to be today? Well, let the clock tell you what it's going to be today.
And every class has a different exit ticket. I love it.
Yes, different levels of thinking. And if you don't like the one that it's on, if it's at 2:45 and you're like, we didn't really talk about main idea, I want them to do more of the predicting, then use the second hand.
Yeah. Oh,
instead of the
look at that.
Yeah.
You can wait for the second hand to land where you want it to.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful.
Yes. All right. And then again, this is just the third one that we saw that we thought was really clever. So you get the idea on here. So we expect to go into numerous classrooms next year, because we can actually come into your classroom next year. Very excited. And I would love to see clocks everywhere.
I think that would be awesome. And this one's good too, because if you don't happen to have a clock in your classroom, or you have a digital clock, then this could be something that you just have up on your screen. It's just looks like a computer screenshot type of thing. So I like that.
Excellent. All right.
This one's fun.
Yeah, this one was fun too. So this is basically putting on your thinking cap. So instead of like doing shoulder partners, like talk and turn, right? This one, you find a different partner and you say, okay, you're going to demonstrate. And so you have a conversation around how would you demonstrate your understanding of a particular concept. And then when the kids are done, they write the name of the partner that they worked with under demonstrate. And then the next time they get this out, they maybe are going to predict, and they go to a different partner and they write down that way, that person's name. So that way they know who they've worked with, who they haven't worked with. And there's some accountability there too. Like, I know I have to go to Val and talk to her. I love her, so that's not a problem. But then I would write her name down, and that's my accountability buddy.
I love that. And for as a teacher, I can look at my students and say, okay, the only one we haven't done is predict. So, this next round, let's make sure that we get to that level if we're there.
Very good. So you can actually use the clock and this
together
for that accountability.
I love
piece.
that.
Look at us. We are so smart.
I know.
We're smart. I'm telling you.
We need to take the show on the road.
Yeah, really. Okay. Moving right along. So think about at this point. So what are your ahas or your takeaways so far? How might this make sense in your world? So think about your classroom and what you already do that you're just a rock star, right? You're in Keller, so obviously.
And you're in our session,
yeah. So obviously you're a rock star. And what can we improve upon? Because we can always improve. And then how can this help us reimagine rigor in relationships? So, maybe you were one of those people that thought rigor just meant more math problems. Not picking on math teachers, or just more essay, a longer essay for your history folks.
10-page packet to review for STAR, right?
Yeah. So we have this quote here: too often we give children answers to remember rather than problems to solve.
Love that.
Right? So one of my favorite things to remind people is, of course, that kids have the answers to almost every question in the palm of their hands, right? And Google can answer it for them in 0.2 seconds.
Yep.
So, but what it can't do is help them solve problems and make connections and those types of things, right? And think at a higher level.
I think that's probably the biggest challenge teachers of today have is that, when I was in school, that was not a thing. Like,
right.
Maybe my partner next to me could tell me, but, and so now I just feel like we have to, but I think it's a good thing. So now we're really having to intentionally think about the types of questions that we're asking our students. And, again, going back to the goals, do we want them to just be able to Google their homework, or do we want them to have to think through, and really get a deep understanding of the information? And is it harder? 100%. Yes, it's harder for us, but our students are getting so much more out of it. And then, if we are worried about that test data, if they are making the deeper connections to the content, then they're going to do fine on the test.
Right.
So, if we're worried about that end game, which I know is always a thing, if we can get them to get that deep level of understanding, they're going to be good. They're going to be fine. Right. So we just have to put in that work, which I know is hard.
And like we mentioned several times, you don't start up here at level 4, whatever level you want to be on. You've got to build that scaffolding and that knowledge and build their level of thinking and their confidence so that they understand they can think at that higher level.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
All right, so just think about the different ways that they can represent their particular understanding. So what strategy do you want to use? Do you want to put them in small groups and have them talk? Do you want to have them create an answer garden, which is a free, awesome
Yes, I love it.
by the way. Are they working on a Jamboard, a Flipgrid? There's a million different ways that kids can show you what they understand, right? So in those lovely performance tasks that we have in all of our curriculum.
Both virtual and in person. And there's nothing wrong with using a digital tool when we're back to fully in person. Putting them in a small group and having them all contribute to a Jamboard or a shared Google slide deck is, we're still going to be able to do that when we're in person. That's one of the blessings that came out of this crazy COVID year.
Right. Yeah. That's one of our tweaks, I think.
Yes.
So we were in a session where we learned something about we're going to toss things, we're going to tweak things, and we're going to treasure things. So what is it that we did during this COVID year that we want to totally toss?
I'm sure we can all think of a few things.
Yes, many. What do we want to tweak? Like, hey, so interactive notebooks actually were pretty effective. Maybe I just need to tweak it a little bit. And then what do we actually want to treasure? There has to be something good that came out of all of this, I would hope.
Yes, I can think of a couple things.
Yeah. So just a general embrace of technology, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm off my soapbox. So
come on down.
Yeah. All right. So still looking again at still at representation. So like the students could give you an oral report on something. They could give you a visual for those kids who are really into art and they're so gifted. Can they do it in writing? Can they act it out? Can they pick a piece of technology still if they're not comfortable? So again, sort of think about all the ways that the kids could show you their levels of understanding. That doesn't have to be on a worksheet or a STAR test or something similar.
Well, and I love the choice piece here. If you're really varying how, if your idea or your goal really is just demonstrate your knowledge of this concept, then let them choose how they want to demonstrate it to, something that they're, like Suzanne said, if they're super artistic, maybe they do want to draw it out. My poor daughter gets stressed out anytime she has to draw. So that is not going to be something that she wants to do. So just giving them that choice of how they want to demonstrate that learning, it just gives them a little bit more student agency, which again, is exactly what we're trying to develop in them. So
I did love that.
All right. This is like the big question at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want you to think about all the information that we have gone over and, thinking about the goals, the thinking, delivery, representation. How do all of those things together support rigor, relationships, engagement, and differentiation? Just a tiny question.
Oh,
I mean,
no.
you guys could probably answer that in like 10 seconds, right? Yeah. We would love to see your answers on Twitter, or you can email us, but we did come up with a hashtag just for fun. Hashtag what is rigor? So if you want to tweet out your thoughts and drop that hashtag, we will look for it and maybe we'll even retweet. You never know. Yeah. But we'd love for you to just take a minute. I know it's easy to just press stop and be done, but take a minute to really think through and reflect on this before you move on, because you never know. There might be a nugget or two that you might want to pick up in August.
All right, that brings us to the end of the session. So here's our contact information. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Always reach out to us. Let us know if there's anything we can do. We'd love to help think through. If you need help building the clock, let us know. We'll come help you build the clock just for fun. So anything we can do to support, getting more student choice, more student voice in classrooms, and really getting them to dig into the content. That's really what we're wanting to see.
And also, as you're starting your year and you're building out those first units, and you want to just bounce some ideas off of us about building relationships, because coming back to school is maybe hard for some kids. I mean, think about in some of our campuses, 40% of our kids were remote. And so if you're looking at like a high school situation, almost half of your students in the high school have never been in a high school, like a physical building. So building those relationships and getting that engagement back in the classroom is going to be, I think it's going to be a difficult year, but I know you can do it because you're awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop recording. I'm trying to use it.